The deep rumble of a motorcycle engine echoed down the quiet street, growing louder with every second. The vibrations trembled beneath Olivia's feet as she gripped her white cane a little tighter. Her ears picked up every detail: the roar of the bike, the distant chatter of people, and the steady breathing of her guide dog, Shadow. He stood still beside her, calm and unshaken, just like always. Then, with a sharp screech, the motorcycle came to an abrupt stop right in front of them. The rider's heavy boots thudded against the pavement as he stepped off. Olivia could feel his presence close by, the scent of leather and oil clinging to the air. "What's this?" the man sneered, his voice dripping with amusement. "A blind girl and her little pet?" Before Olivia could respond, she heard a sudden thud. The man had kicked Shadow in the side. Her breath caught in her throat. Shadow didn't move. He didn't bark. He didn't even flinch. But something was off. Olivia could feel it in the way he stood, in the air around them. The motorcyclist let out a low chuckle and muttered something under his breath before walking away. But Olivia wasn't thinking about him anymore. Her mind was on Shadow. Why hadn't he reacted? He was trained to protect, to defend. Something wasn't right. And in that moment, Olivia knew this wasn't over. Olivia had spent her whole life proving she could be independent. People always assumed she was fragile just because she was blind. They spoke louder than necessary, treated her like she was helpless. She had learned to ignore the whispers, the pitying looks. But what they didn't know was that Shadow wasn't just any guide dog, he was something much more. Before becoming Olivia's partner, Shadow had lived a different life. He wasn't just trained to help, he was trained to protect. A former K-9 officer, he had faced dangers most people couldn't imagine. His scars, both seen and unseen, told stories of battles he had fought. But to Olivia, he wasn't just a warrior, he was family. That's why his reaction earlier troubled her. Shadow never backed down, never hesitated. So why hadn't he defended himself? Why had he stood still when that man attacked him? Sitting on the edge of her bed, Olivia ran her fingers over Shadow's collar, her mind racing. "Why didn't you do anything?" she whispered. Shadow lifted his head, his deep brown eyes locking onto hers. There was something unspoken between them. Then, as if reading her thoughts, Shadow let out a slow breath and nudged her hand with his nose. Olivia understood. They had been silent for too long. Maybe it was time for the world to know the truth. That night, Liam sat on the edge of his bed, his fingers tracing the smooth metal tag on Titan's collar. His mind was spinning. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the memory of what happened earlier. The cruel words. The kick. The way Titan had just stood there, silent and unmoving. It didn't make sense. Titan had always been more than just a guide dog. He was a protector. A fighter. So why had he done nothing? Liam's grip on the collar tightened. "Titan," he whispered, "should we show them who you really are?" Titan lifted his head and met Liam's gaze. There was something in his deep, steady eyes, something unspoken but strong. He understood. They had both been silent for too long. Liam took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time for the world to see Titan for what he truly was. Not just a guide dog. Not just an ordinary companion, but a warrior. The next morning, as Liam and Titan stepped outside, everything felt different. Liam wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't unsure. He knew what had to be done. Titan walked beside him, his posture strong, his presence unwavering. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. And this time, the world would know the truth. The next day, Ava and Shadow walked with purpose. She wasn't sure what she expected: an apology, an explanation, maybe even nothing at all. But she needed answers. Then she heard it. The loud, rumbling engine. The same sound from the day before. Ava's grip tightened on Shadow's harness as the motorcycle screeched to a stop. But this time, the rider wasn't alone. Laughter filled the air. A group of his friends stood around him, their voices mocking and arrogant. Well, the motorcyclist sneered. "Look who's back. Here to show off your little pet?" Ava's heart pounded not with fear, but with determination. She took a deep breath. I'm not here to show off, she said. I'm here to set things straight. The man stepped forward, smirking, reaching toward Shadow's collar. But Ava moved first, blocking his hand. Shadow, she said firmly. Show him. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't flinch. He simply stepped forward, standing tall, strong, unwavering, trained. The motorcyclist hesitated. He wasn't looking at just any dog now. He was looking at a force he didn't understand. Ava felt the shift. The power was in her hands now. I don't think you get it, she said, her voice steady. Shadow isn't just a guide dog. He's a protector. A warrior. The motorcyclist's confidence wavered. He had no idea what he was up against. But soon he would. Noah's mind raced. The way the man had reacted. It didn't feel normal. It was almost like he was hiding something. ASE stood outside the cafe. A thought struck him. What if the answer wasn't in what was said, but in what wasn't? Taking a deep breath, Noah walked back inside. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. He approached the counter, his eyes scanning the place carefully. Then he saw it. A faint smudge on the man's sleeve, dark, oily, barely noticeable, but Noah recognized it instantly. It was the same kind of grease used in old machines. His stomach twisted. The abandoned factory. The realization hit him like a punch. Could it really be connected? Was this man somehow involved? Noah didn't have proof yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, the man spoke. You should let this go, kid, he muttered, his voice low, almost a warning. Noah's pulse quickened. That one sentence confirmed it. He was on the right track. But he wouldn't back down. With one last look, he stepped outside. The air felt heavier, charged with a new kind of tension. He had started something much bigger than he realized. And now, there was no turning back. Emma hesitated. Something about the old book felt off. She'd found it tucked behind the shelf, its leather cover coated in dust. The title had faded, but she could still make out a few letters. Enough to send a chill down her spine. Flipping it open, she saw the first page filled with shaky handwriting. If you're reading this, it's already too late. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The words were scribbled in dark ink, rushed and uneven, like someone had written them in a panic. Her fingers trembled as she turned the next page. More writing. They watch from the shadows. They know when you found this. Don't stay here too long. She swallowed hard. Was this a joke? Or was it real? Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Her heart pounded. The room was supposed to be empty. But now, she wasn't so sure. A cold draft brushed against her skin. The light overhead flickered. Emma slowly closed the book and stepped backward. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Then, she heard a soft whisper. Not from the book. From the dark corner of the room. She spun around, but nothing was there. Just shadows stretching across the walls. Or was something hiding in them? She had to get out. Now. With the book clutched tight, Emma turned and bolted. She didn't care where, she just knew she couldn't stay. Noah had heard the stories, but he never believed them. Until now. The old hotel had been abandoned for years, but tonight he stood in its dusty hallway, staring at something that shouldn't exist. A door. His flashlight flickered as he reached for the handle. The wood was cold, the metal knob freezing against his skin. Noah swallowed hard. He'd explored this place before. There had never been a door here. He pushed it open. Inside was a perfectly clean bedroom, a sharp contrast to the rotting walls outside. A lamp glowed softly. The bed was neatly made. It looked as if someone had just stepped out. A shiver crawled up his spine. This wasn't possible. Then he saw it. A journal sat open on the desk. His name was written at the top of the page. Noah's hands trembled as he stepped closer. The ink looked fresh. The words sent a chill through his bones. You shouldn't be here, Noah. A creak echoed behind him. He spun around. The door gone. The walls shifted. The ceiling stretched. The room darkened. Something was changing. Noah's breath came fast and shallow. He raced to where the door had been and pounded against the wall. Nothing. Then the lamp flickered out. And he wasn't alone anymore.